Now, we all know, Bob, that as a business, when the fight is big enough, you've worked with Don King, you've worked with De La Hoya, even Al Heyman. How do you make this happen?
Al Heyman, he refuses to allow any of his fighters to get beat by a top-ranked fighter. And if Terrence fights Errol Spence, there's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford fights Errol Spence. There's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. And Al Heyman refuses to allow it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this breaking news. A statement from Oscar De La Hoya on Alejandra Jimenez testing positive for banned substances. Los Angeles, January 24th, 2020. It is extremely unfortunate to learn that WBC and WBO super middleweight world champion Alejandra Jimenez has tested positive for banned substances after her title fight with Franchon CREWS-DEZURN, said Oscar De La Hoya, chairman and CEO of Golden Boy. As Franchon's promoter, we are incredibly disappointed for her as she worked incredibly hard to defend her titles. However, our job is to ensure the safety of our fighters, both inside and outside of the ring. Thus, we have always insisted and supported testing through the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, VADA, for all our World Championship fights. Jimenez's fight against Franchon CREWS-DEZURN is no exception. Now our job is to find justice for Franchon by working closely with the WBC and the WBO to reinstate her as World Champion. And until such a time, justice will not be served. Do realize something, folks. For those of you who follow Ring IQ on Facebook, you'll already know what my position on Jimenez was. That there was something off about that performance. There was something off about Jimenez as a fighter. We know that Jimenez came down from the heavyweight division, which is a hell of a feat. I mean, it really is.
All the way down to super middleweight.
But when you take into consideration the fight, the aesthetic of the match with Franchon CREWS, the fact that Franchon CREWS is no pillow puncher. This is one of the hardest punchers in the entire super middleweight division. And yet, Jimenez took all of the shots, clean shots, in stride and powered forward relentlessly from the opening bell to the final bell, showing no signs of letting up, no signs of letting off, wasn't hurt, wasn't buzzed, simply ate the shots like a breakfast burrito. You'll excuse me for saying so, but any fighter that cuts that much weight, a fighter that used to campaign as a heavyweight, making their way down to super middleweight, being able to put on such a physical performance, because that's what it was. If you want to describe what Alejandra went out there and did, it wasn't an exhibit of the sweet science per se, hit and not get hit.
Wasn't that?
It wasn't that at all. It was a physical performance to where a naturally bigger fighter is attempting to mow down a naturally smaller fighter. And in the process of doing so, she's absorbing all kinds of hard shots, but she's not the least bit bothered. And her energy reserves seem very much intact from the beginning of the fight to the end of the fight. That's peculiar for a fighter who came all the way down from heavyweight to super middleweight. You imagine that the fighter and their physicality, some portion of it, some ability to perform, will be lost on the descent, that there is more acclimating to do. Alejandra Jimenez last campaigned as a heavyweight in November of 2017, and she's been working her way down ever since. That puts the time span of the journey at about 2 years or close to it. And the wide-eyed optimist in all of us would like to believe that Alejandra did it clean, that she did it all the right way, but given that performance, I'm just not buying it. I'm not.
Nope.
It seemed entirely possible to me that Alejandra Jimenez could be transitioning from a female to a male, given her appearance. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. And we all heard the pitch of her voice. These seemed like indicators to me of someone who could be on hormone treatments, someone who might be all hopped up on testosterone to enhance their appearance as a male. Having seen images of Alejandra with what looked like a wispy mustache, well, these are all indicators of someone who's transitioning in gender. And in the sport of boxing, if you're campaigning as a female fighter, but you're on hormone treatments to enhance your appearance as a male, well, that's cheating. you're achieving a competitive edge via hormone treatments. That's one possibility. And I want to make this clear that these were just my speculations post-fight. It seemed to me that Alejandra Jimenez might be achieving a competitive edge via hormone treatments. At this time, we don't know what banned substances were found in her system, but I'm sure we're going to find out in the coming days and weeks. But better still, this seemed entirely possible to me given the aforementioned indicators. Just as well, we already know that Alejandra is coming down from heavyweight to super middleweight, and it's entirely possible that at some point she may have ingested clenbuterol as to lose fat but not muscle mass and the ability to perform. As we all know, this is what clenbuterol is used for.
In boxing, yeah.
The cheat code to losing weight but not losing physicality, not losing performance. I want you guys to understand that it's entirely possible that Alejandra had more than one banned substance in her system. I wouldn't rule it out. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Who knows what kind of cocktail she was on? But I derived these speculations from the performance. That, okay, you go out there the first couple of rounds and you're looking relentless, that's not going to raise any flags. But when you fight the whole fight that way and you've been getting nailed clean with hard shots, big right hands, and you're still not letting up, you're still not letting off, you know, it's going to look a certain way, especially for a fighter who lost that much weight in that duration of time. I mean, we're not talking weight loss for the sake of weight loss. These are pro fighters. We see what having to lose a couple of pounds here and there does to a fighter all the time. A couple of pounds, 2 or 3, might be the difference between a fighter who can perform and a fighter who's drained. Whereas in Alejandra, we're talking about a fighter who came down several weight classes.
Didn't acclimate to most of them.
Goes out there and looks like a fucking locomotive. So I'm just holding out hope that this issue gets resolved, that French on CREWS is reinstated as the unified super middleweight champion, and that Alejandra/Alejandro is brought to justice. Because I said it on Ring IQ Facebook, I said it to Ebony Bridges on Instagram. Something's wrong here, and I don't fucking like it. In other news, developments in the lightweight division, rumblings that Devin Haney will move to 140 pounds for his next fight, but nothing decided as he continues to recover from shoulder surgery. In regards to the upcoming WBC title fight for what is the newly vacated WBC title, Javier Fortuna and Luke Campbell have agreed to terms for a vacant WBC lightweight title bout. The fight will be streamed by DAZN and is being targeted for March 28th. April is also possible. New York is under consideration. Vasily Lomachenko is the WBC franchise champion. We first must address the possibility that Devin Haney could be leaving the weight class. I think now is an inopportune time for Devin Haney to start thinking about campaigning at 140 pounds. I mean, things are really just starting to heat up at 135. Lots of players, lots of names, lots of good action, lots of ways for a young fighter like Devin Haney to really make a name for himself and establish himself as what could be one of the most dominant forces in boxing. I'd hate to think that he were leaving the division now. If he goes to 140, I'm just hoping it's a one-off.
Yeah.
And he returns, because the division is that much better for having him there, 135. I don't think that Devin is ready for what 140 has to offer. I really don't. Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez, Regis Prograis, Ivan Bedenchik, those guys. I haven't seen enough from Devin at the world level, the level that he just got to. I haven't seen enough of him there that I feel confident he's ready for the upper tier of the 140-pound division, in which case I think he's better suited, more adequately suited, to campaign as a 135-pounder until he fully grows and gains his grown man strength, which I don't think he has right now. I'm hoping that if he does go to 140, it's a brief stint, and that he will return to 135. When it comes to Luke Campbell and Javier Fortuna, I'm glad to see that things are progressing, things are moving along, and this could be one of the first fights we see in the first quarter of 2020. Regardless of who wins that fight, regardless of how you might have it, that fight has all the makings of a great fight because Javier Fortuna, he's a live animal. He comes to fight. He's not the kind of fighter that goes in there looking to win on the scorecards. So Luke is going to have his work cut out for him if he wants to claim that vacant title.
Better stay sharp.
The ideal place for that fight is in the United Kingdom. What better place to see an Olympic gold medalist who's already represented Great Britain and achieved Olympic gold, the highest honor that any amateur fighter can achieve. What better place to see a guy like that potentially become a world champion than in the United Kingdom as opposed to the United States? I mean, what would be the point in bringing that fight here? You know, Luke doesn't have a following here, and neither does Javier Fortuna. I mean, that's the point. You're trying to sell the fight, right? Well, you can really sell that thing over there in Luke's backyard, but here in America, Javier doesn't have a following. I'm not questioning his ability to fight. I'm not questioning his heart or even trying to take a shot at the guy. I'm just being honest that he doesn't have a following. So that fight doesn't really have a place here. I think in all likelihood it will land over there in the UK, rightfully so. It's easier to sell. And I think it makes for a great fight. I think that this is quite the happenstance for Luke Campbell, who already tried for the green belt, and he came up short. You know, when he fought Vasyl Lomachenko, a very spirited effort. He looked formidable against one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And this is a pure happenstance when you think about how all of this went down, that Vasyl Lomachenko wins the green belt, but he becomes the franchise champion, so the actual belt is awarded to Devin Haney, the runner-up, and Devin Haney injures his shoulder, and he's unable to defend it, so it ends up on the line for Luke Campbell. I mean, that really is a happenstance by definition, a fortuitous turn of chance, a fortuitous occurrence. There's no other way to describe this, and it's up to Luke now to make the most of this, to not look past Javier Fortuna. Take him as seriously as you took Vasyl Lomachenko, because he's going to put up a fight to get that belt, and it's going to be up to Luke to stop him.
I overheard your comments yesterday. Somebody asked you about the WBO situation, and I find it flattering because I tell people, like, all of a sudden they're ranking the PBC fighters. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, when did this happen? Do you feel like the politics, Top Rank, are trying to set you up so they can tell the fans,
I ducked or whatever?
Yeah.
But I'm ranked number 1 in every one.
Yeah.
WBC, WBA, and WBO. So at the end of the day, you gotta understand. At the end of the day, I don't have to fight nobody.
Yeah.
I don't have mandatories. They're the champions, right?
Yeah.
So I fight whoever I want to fight. I do what I want to do.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sound of modern mediocrity. That Danny Garcia actually holds a prime position to potentially challenge Terence Crawford for that WBO title, but Danny's not interested. According to Danny, very soon, he could be campaigning as a junior middleweight. He's looking to have 2 more fights in the welterweight division, none of which seem to involve Terence Crawford. At the end of the day, that is simply a fight, which, its outcome, Danny rather not know. I remember only months ago that people were saying that the WBO persecutes PBC fighters. They don't rank them. Yet Danny Garcia and Sergey Lipinets have graced the WBO's ranked standings for months while these conversations were going on.
Y'all ain't know?
And if there has been movement in the WBO's ranked standings at 147, it's because of the same reason that there's always movement in the ranked standings. Because the then top contender, Igus Kavaliauskas, was defeated. So Danny's the next guy in line. But Danny doesn't want to be the next guy in line. That's what it boils down to. I mean, I'm not saying anything here that you probably didn't know already. That Danny Garcia has never had any intention of fighting Terence Crawford, and that regardless of whatever barbs were traded between these 2 guys, particular to Danny's side of things, whatever was said, it was said without the intention of fighting Terence Crawford. This rivalry is no recent development. This has been going on for years, these 2 guys going back and forth with each other. And the narrative used to be that Terence Crawford needs to move up from 140 to 147 so that he can fight the killers. He does this, and suddenly these quote-unquote killers won't give him the time of day. Danny's more concerned with moving to the junior middleweight division, and he plans to do this in another 2 fights.
Okay.
God only knows why, because I can't give that kid any kind of odds to beat the top-tier guys at 154 when, technically, you didn't beat any of the top-tier guys at 147. Do you guys realize that Danny Garcia's been campaigning as a welterweight for something like 4 years now? Yes, the Rod Salka fight, about 4 years ago, was a fight that was fought a pound above the junior welterweight limit. That qualifies it as a welterweight contest because it's a pound above the limit. Danny Garcia's been campaigning as a welterweight for that long. But in that duration of time, what has he actually done?
Huh?
Who's he actually beaten?
Huh?
Adrian Granados? Brandon Rios? Paulie Malignaggi? A very faded Robert Guerrero? Rod Salka? I mean, if we talk about what Danny's done as a welterweight,
It ain't much.
all he's done is lose to most every top-shelf, top-tier fighter that he's fought. That's only two guys, Keith Thurman and Sean Porter. That aside, his welterweight resume is very thin. It's for this reason he's still coattailing success from things he did over 4 years ago at junior welterweight. You still see guys bringing up Amir Khan and Lucas Mathise like those fights weren't over 4 years ago.
Give me a break.
In what is the what have you done for me lately sport. And that's just it. Danny Garcia ain't done both fucking diddly lately. I mean, if I had a nickel for every PBC nut-hugging weirdo who rants and raves about how great Danny Garcia's resume is, I'd be a very rich man. But as it stands, this is a guy who's got no credible victories in the last 4 fucking years. What I'm getting at here, people, is that Danny Garcia stopped being a competitor a while ago. A long while ago. And what he is today is merely a parody of a boxer. An opportunist, really, because there is no competitive drive in this guy. If he really were a competitor, he'd want to settle the score with Terrence Crawford now that they're campaigning at the same weight. Yet what Danny Garcia means to do is leave the division, having never fought that guy. Hey, listen, I'm not telling you he's a bad fighter or that he didn't used to be a good fighter. I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying that you can spare me the Lucas Mathise and Amir Khan references because those fucking fights were over 4 years ago. What has Danny done since then? The most news he's making now isn't even for the fight that he's about to have, but him potentially leaving the weight class. Leaving the weight class, having never fought Terrence Crawford. Why am I not surprised?